Cool. Hey everyone, it's Devin here with Make Anything, and I just want to say I'm a little sorry for not putting out any crazy outrageous projects this month. It's December, holiday season, I'm kind of living my own life, but I'm still trying to put something out every week, no matter how small. And you know what, sometimes things can be really cool when they're especially small, like this week's project. Here we've got this little terrarium that features an East Coast scene with this tiny little lighthouse sitting on top of a cliff over the edge of this really sparkling, clear ocean. And there's some birds flying above. It's really cool. And this is actually a gift that my girlfriend made for her mom, but I did help out a little bit, printing that lighthouse and breaking some glass. But overall, I really just wanted to share it with you guys because I thought it's really neat and it's a pretty quick project. You can finish it in a day. Most of the supplies are available at your local craft store, except of course that little bit I 3D printed. You can download that for free on My Mini Factory, or you can make it by other means, out of foam, out of wood, use little Monopoly pieces. There's many ways to do it, but today I want to show you how we did it. So let's get right into it. Let's get started by printing that lighthouse and the little house that goes besides it. They're really small as you saw, so I'm going to print this on my Anycubic i3 Mega using MatterHacker's Pro PLA, which should help me get a pretty nice high detailed little model. So you can see I'm printing this lighthouse with a little brim, and that's going to help it stick to the build plate since this is a narrow, tall object. It's a nice little thing to do. And here we have it printing out, and you can see it's not perfectly detailed, but it looks quite nice for its size, and it's printing at 0.15 millimeter layer heights. I also printed the house on the same print, which worked out really well, but I didn't exactly place things correctly, so that happened. No big deal. It survived, and here you can see how it looks up close. So yeah, some of those ridges were modeled in, others were just from the printer not being perfectly accurate, but it does look very nice. And I was actually pretty impressed by how much detail came out with the house. I wasn't sure if it would pick up all those little windows and those little chimneys, but it looks really great. So now we're going to start working on the glass jar that is encasing our terrarium. We're going to start by cleaning it all out with a microfiber cloth to make sure there's no grease and fingerprints on it, just so it's nice and clean, especially since the first thing we want to do is a little bit of painting on the glass. So we're just using some acrylic paint here. You can use any cheap acrylic. We're thinning it out a little bit with some water, and then we're going to paint some tiny little birds on the top of the glass here. So this part requires a really fine brush and a very steady hand, but it looks really nice, and it doesn't even have to be perfect because these are just little tiny things. We just want little indications of birds. And the reason we're drawing it on the inside of the glass is just to protect it, because of course you're going to see it from the other side, but it still looks nice drawn on the inside. Now we're going to use some red acrylic paint and start painting on our models. So the base color of our models is actually white, so that's nice that I used white filament. We don't have to give it a primer coat or anything. We can just start painting directly on top of the model. And we're just going to use that thin brush again and start giving it some little red accents. So we looked at a few references of different lighthouses on the East Coast and decided to go with this red striped pattern. It's all freehand from this point, so of course it's going to help to have some experience painting, especially small things, and having a really steady hand. But when you're working on things this tiny, little mistakes won't really get noticed, so just do the best you can. Here's the lighthouse with the red finished, and let's go ahead and use that same red on the house to kind of tie the two together. So we're going to go ahead and paint the little rooftop with that same basic red acrylic. We're also going to use a little bit of black on the lighthouse just to give it a little more detail and separate the parts. So we're going to have that black top, and then we'll fill in the windows and doors with black as well to give them a better sense of depth and an illusion of kind of an inside of this lighthouse when really it's printed solid. Now we can start building up our terrarium, and we're going to use this kind of darker sand to create the base layer and give the illusion of wet sand. So we'll make a decent base with that sand, and as you can see, we kind of shook it level so that it's slanted to mimic those slanted shores on the coast. And then we'll start working on this rock, which is going to be our cliff. So this is actually a rock that was found at a tide pool. You can see all these really cool holes that it has. And we're gonna coat the top of it with Mod Podge. That way we can glue some sand on top of that and not worry about it falling off. For this top layer, we're gonna use another sand that we got at the craft store, which is a little finer, and as you can see, it's a lot more white. So that is gonna be our dry sand in this scene. So we've got that rock covered in the sand, and then we're also gonna carefully scoop some more sand behind that rock to kind of create a raised area that leads into this cliff. So we'll fill that in and carefully smooth it out and shape it with the spoon to get the kind of look that we want. And then we'll have that wrap around the side of the cliff and kind of blend into the wet sand. For the water, we thought it would be interesting to just use glass. And we have this rippled glass bottle that we're just gonna smash and recycle to make our water in the terrarium. So we'll cover that up with this rag so that shards don't fly everywhere and just give it a swift smash. And now we've got a bunch of little pieces of glass to select from. And we're just gonna sort through that and find the ones that kind of look like they'll be the right size and shape for our terrarium. Just like we did with that white sand, we'll use the spoon to kind of scoop some glass into that water side of our terrarium. And we're also gonna place some of the larger pieces all facing the same direction to mimic the motion of the water. Next, we're gonna add some greenery because a lot of beaches on the East Coast will have grass and shrubs that go right up to the sand. We'll do this by just painting thin layers of Mod Podge onto this mirror or any piece of glass, and then we're gonna stick moss onto that to create these little patches that we can put in our scene. While a lot of terrariums will use living moss and plants, we're just gonna use this preserved moss that we got at the craft store because it looks just as great and requires a lot less care, which is a big bonus. You can just break that up and place it on the little glue patches, and then after it's dried a bit, it'll stick into a single sheet, which we'll scrape off with this little spatula, and we can place that in our scene. Here you can see Natalie carefully placing down the moss, and because the glue isn't completely dry, you can still kind of stick it down where you want. And it's definitely helpful to have small hands to be able to reach down there and place your moss and other things, but I would probably just use tweezers or maybe get a larger glass jar. We're gonna add some of this darker moss as well to kind of act as shrubs. I'm just gonna disperse those in our scene until it looks nice. And of course, this is the scene that Natalie wanted to create, but you can design your space however you want. So now that we've placed all our terrain, we can finish it off by gluing down the lighthouse and the house. And we're gonna be using that E6000 adhesive that I use all the time because it works pretty well for just about any material. And we'll place that down and we've got ourselves a complete little scene. I think it came out really great, and I love the rock that Natalie selected. It's got these really cool little features, and it looks like it could be a giant cave instead of these little holes that are in this small rock. The one thing that we would have liked to change was to maybe have some green or blue glass to mix in with the ocean, but it still did come out looking really nice, and I love the way it catches light. I've got to say, I always really like these little miniature worlds. It's fun to be able to look down upon it and see it from all these different angles and kind of imagine what's going on inside this little tiny terrarium. So if you were to make one, let me know what kind of scene you would put inside. Post a comment and that'll be fun to hear. But that's it for today, so hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, I'm Devin. This is Make Anything. Don't forget to stay inspired.